Namaste Charavindam Bhajami Radham Aravinda Netram Smarami Radham Madhurashmitasyam Varari Radham Charadam Tatomam Rastikatena Chapi. I'm first of all offering millions and millions in Bhagavad Pranams and the lotus feet of my most beloved Guru, Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Astotar Zarashishima Shri Bhakti Pranam Goswami Maharaj. And the same again, millions of times, as the lotus feet of our most beloved Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Astotar Zarashishima Shri Bhakti Pranam Goswami Shri Prabhupada. And all the Vaishnava and Vaishnavi devotees headed by V Tridandi. All glories to Srila Gurudev. So, this I think is my fifth class. Fifth. This is the fifth and I have two. Now tomorrow is that day. So that will be the fifth. So each day, before we've entered this very sweet and confidential topic, we've appreciated the Srimad Bhagavatam itself in its entirety. Each day, if you'll notice, I've spoken each canto specifically. I've said something about every single canto specifically to make it clear that we're in progression. It's a staircase. And at the end of the second canto, 10th chapter, the first verse, it's describing all the different topics of the Bhagavatam. Atra Sarvo Vishargascha Stanam Koshanam Utaya Manvantarashano Kata Niroda Mukti Ashraya. These are the 10 topics in the Bhagavatam. The 10 subject matters. Be clear on this. I really want you to appreciate this entirety of the Bhagavatam. The other day, Vaikanis Maharaj was speaking. He said, many of you probably have heard so much of the Bhagavatam, but probably just in isolated sections of it. But you haven't actually strung it together like on a thread. So what I'm really trying to emphasize very much in entering into these most confidential topics, that the appreciation of the previous topics has to be very much understood and absorbed by the serious side. So this Atra Shargo Vishargascha, this is the creation and the sub-creation. This is described, the creation is described in the 3rd canto, chapter 6. And the sub-creation is by Lord Brahma. This is also in the 3rd canto, chapter 20. Try to have it in this life in our hands, this Bhagavatam. Actually, when you read the commentaries of Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur and Srila Jiva Goswami, they are literally running up and down the Bhagavatam. All of their commentaries are just making reference to all aspects of the Bhagavatam, because it's all part of the whole. You can't separate, you can't say, oh, my heart is the most important feature. It may be the most important feature, but if you disregard the hands and the legs and the head and the rest of the body, etc., then how are you going to function? So all aspects of the body have to be functioning, including the heart, which is actually the Ashraya, which is the Prayojan Tattva. So without that being made prominent, as Srila Gurudev just said in his lecture just now, in Bhajan, he's just emphasizing this point, because you can get left behind in paying attention too much to the hands and the legs and the stomach, etc., just reading books only, but not understanding the subject matter of the book. So, Atra Sargo Vishargascha Stanam. Stanam means depending on Krishna. Stanam, that's Sita, or depending on Vishnu, actually, in the proper terminology, Vishnu. Vishnu is there, the supreme controller, the supreme support. And then Poshana, how Krishna's devotees are supported by him, by Vishnu. All the way through, this is like in the 5th canto, you have, or the 6th canto rather, Ajami and Indra and Chitraketu. These personalities, they're shown this Poshana aspect. And then Manvantara, all the different Manvantaras are described. And then Ishana Katha, this Katha about Isha, Krishna, this sweet Katha about Krishna. And then Nirodha, this is actually the destruction. This is in the 12th canto.
Skip Uti.
Huh?
Uti.
Oh, I didn't do Uti. Uti is the creative energy or calm vasana. It's described, and this can be positive and negative. So actually the example that's always given is Hiranyakashipu. This is the example of this Uti. It's this creative energy, and creative in a negative way, because Hiranyakashipu was such a supreme controller in his time. So, I mean, he could produce the jewels from the ocean. He told the various astrological constellations how to come in the night sky. He directed the seasons. He directed everything. This is an example of this demoniac Uti. And it's called Kama Vasana. So this is understood as being in the 7th canto. And then this Nirodhi is in the 12th canto. And Muktiya, liberation, is described in the 11th canto. And all these collectively culminate in the 10th canto, which is called the Ashraya. Now in the Ashraya there are two aspects to it. There's the Ashrita, which depends on the Ashraya. The Ashraya is that which is independent. And then there's the Ashrita, which all the other 9 cantos embody, which depend on the 10th canto. So you can just see by that simple example. It's like, and it's opened in the very beginning of the Vedanta Sutra. Atato Jignasu Raman. This worship of Janmadi Asyayata Nidyan. This worship in the first aphorism of Vedanta Sutra is indicating Brahman. It's indicating the Ashraya straight away. So we have to have our sadhya set on there. But never consider to neglect the Ashrita. How are all these beautiful steps built? Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes when there are prayers by the various demigods glorifying Krishna, this is also the Ashraya, because it's focusing directly on Krishna. So before we begin to come into this 10th canto today, as I've done each day, we have to be very comfortable with this platform and understanding of it actually heightens the confidentiality, because as I said yesterday, Parikshit Maharaj is listening to all these very sober, very grave discussions. Prithu Maharaj, Dhruva Maharaj, Shiva and Daksha, Ajamil, all these Yamadutas, Vishnudutas, the warring between the demigods and the demons, and all very grave subject, and the creation of the universe, etc. And the destruction of the universe is also mentioned prior to the 12th canto. But it's all very sobering. But when you come into this 10th canto, just like a door opens, a whole other atmosphere pervades of frivolity and sweetness and splendor, all based, as I described yesterday, on a backdrop of the most beautiful natural environment. All the different trees and the flowers and the birds and the animals, etc., and the cows specifically. All of this mood is very gentle and incredibly soft, like the nature of spiritual culture itself is incredibly soft and sensitive and fully respectful and always affectionate. Envy and lust are unknown in Braj. They don't have a place. They don't have a support. That's why Leela Shakti invites them in the form of these demons, just to show actually some connection with the material world. And of course many reasons for the demons, as we've described in the past, But the principal reason is for Krishna's entertainment also. So in this particular pastime we're going to discuss today, this Brahma, Vimoha and Leela. This is so beautiful. And this is specifically Krishna's thinking when he's taking his picnic, that now he would like some actual extra entertainment. So then Lord Brahma is inspired to come. But prior to this, we'll make our way into this 10th canto. So yesterday, we concluded with Abhasura. And I described how actually Shukadeva Goswami, on hearing the enthusiasm of Parikshit's questions, wanting more of these pastimes, went into a trance of ecstasy and actually passed out. And it was described how Vyasadeva, Narada, and the other great rishis, they had to chant loudly to revive him. Now when he revives, then he begins to glorify Parikshit Maharaj as being that Bhagavat Uttama, the greatest of Bhagavats, because he's always hungry to hear these same pastimes that he's heard many times before. It's described that actually Parikshit asks a question. He says, why do you call me this Bhagavat Uttama? Why are you calling me that? The best of devotees. And then Shukadeva is responding, because even if you've heard these pastimes so many times, he's seeing that you're appreciating them as if they're ever fresh, as if they're newer and newer and newer. So Paramahamsas attached to Krishna in the core of their hearts, it is their nature to talk about him at every moment, just as materialists like to discuss women and sex life. So this is the nature of Paramahamsas. They only want to hear about and discuss these very sweet and confidential topics. They're confidential because they're so intimate, because they're so personal, they're so vulnerable, you can say. They're so soft and gentle and charming. There's nothing abrasive about any of this, because we enter this atmosphere of Raj, and it's just sublime. It's only sweet. It's only perfection of the heart's gentility. So now, as we were describing yesterday, after they swam for a while in the stomach of Abhasura and actually died in his stomach, and Krishna revived them, then now they come to the bank of the Jamuna. And there's a couple of verses describing the beauty and softness of the sand of the Jamuna. Again, this is contributing to the speciality of the atmosphere in this spiritual realm. And it's described how there were many beautiful lotuses growing in Jamuna Devi. And there were beautiful singing birds. And there was tall, very tall, wonderful, shady trees. Because at this time of the day, after the Abhasura demon, it's described, it's past noon. It's past their lunchtime, their dinner time. So the sun is high, so it's hot. So specifically, these shady trees are described. And it's described that they find this beautiful, soft sand. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is saying that it is as comfortable as the lap of a mother. This is how he describes it. This place where they're all sitting. It's as comfortable as the lap of a mother. And now they decided to take their picnic because it's past noon. So they very nicely tether the calves to a place where there's much green grass. They don't have to wander away. As the pastime unfolds, this is a very pertinent point because there's no reason for them to go away. Because actually there's abundant grass there for them to actually take the whole time. And then they've taken their baths in the Jamuna and cleansed themselves from the stomach of Abhasura. And now it's described very beautifully, and Srila Gurudev specifically describes this a number of times, how Krishna is sitting in the center of all these thousands of cowherd boys. But they're all feeling that Krishna is facing just them. And they're not feeling that they're left out on the back of a circle. How could that be a reality in a spiritual world, that someone is feeling they're right at the back of the queue, or right at the back of the circle? They're all Nitya Siddha Parikas. And they're all experiencing this close proximity with Krishna directly. Krishna sitting in the center, in the whorl of a lotus flower, is described. And this is also described in Bhagavad Gita, in the 13th chapter, 14th verse, that everywhere are his hands, eyes, legs, heads, faces, etc. So this is also a confirmation from the Bhagavad Gita. So unless, of course, we've appreciated these previous scriptures, how can we really relish these topics fully?
How is it possible? If you're in the center, if you're looking this way, there's got to be people on the other side looking at his back.
Krishna is simultaneously turning around. Krishna is showing to every single, just like when he performs the Rasa Leela, he's dancing one Krishna between two gopis. And each gopi is thinking, well, only I'm dancing with Krishna. They don't even see the other gopi. So what to speak of this little exhibition of Aishwarya? But it's not Aishwarya. I hope you understand this point. I haven't actually specifically explained it. But something that is Aishwarya means that everybody perceiving that considers it beyond human pastimes. Just like in Puridam, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is dancing and fountains like sprays of tears are coming from it, everyone's thinking, oh, this must be the Supreme Personality of Godhead to exhibit such a remarkable pastime. So they are all thinking that he is God. But in the Braj pastimes, it's never, the cowherd boys are never thinking that, oh, somehow or other Krishna is facing everyone. They're not considering that. Just like when he lifts Govardhan Hill. That would seem to be the most Aishwarya type of act. But it's not, because people actually think that Nanda Baba is holding it up with his stick. All the other suckers are holding it up. Or Radharani is holding, actually Radharani is holding it up with her press. Or the Govardhan himself is flying and actually holding himself up. But not this little boy Krishna is actually holding up. They're not thinking like that. They're thinking Krishna obviously has something to do with it. But he's not the principle behind it. So they're not seeing with a view of his majesty. This is the difference. So understand this point very clearly, and then it'll make you appreciate these pastimes more significantly. So Krishna is facing everybody, and then it's described how each boy brings special prashadam for the picnic. They all have wonderful mothers, we're going to discuss today, later. And they've all made exceptional preparations. So they all take these preparations out, and they make their lunch plates out of different materials, like the rocks or leaves or baskets or the bark of trees and flowers, etc. This also indicates their individuality. It's not like a group consciousness institution. They are all realized individual, unique souls who only want to bring special, unique taste to Krishna. Individual taste. This is why Krishna is so anxious to interact with every single boy, because they each have that jewel that he wants to taste, that only that boy has. And we're the same, actually, in this world. We also have that individual rasa with Krishna that no one in existence has. Only we have that. Each individual person. So never try and become like everybody else, because that's not the heart of it. Just appreciate our own personality and individuality. And that is what Krishna wants to taste. This aspect. So it's defined here by the way they put their lunch bags up. And then they shared their lunch bags. And they all relished all these different tastes, and they joked and laughed. And it's described in this part of Bhagavatam that one secretly takes a samosa and puts some flowers in it, and then Saka, he tastes that and becomes very unhappy, and then they chase that person away who put the flowers in it. And it's also described, because they're still little boys. Actually, I described yesterday that in this Leela, they are just on the cusp. They're coming out of Kumara Leela. Kumara, Balya Leela, is actually the very end of Aghasura. And this Brahma Vimohan is the very beginning of Polganda. So it hasn't actually come yet. Because in the next pastime, which is the Nukasura, this is when the characteristics of Krishna's Polganda age are really accentuated and pulled out. like his feet become bigger, his waist is more narrow. So many things of this nature. So still, it's not quite in Poganda age at this time.
For you people, can you say age levels because Poganda?
We did the other day. This is the wonderful opportunity is having these seminars because most of the time it's the same people every day. So we don't have to keep repeating ourselves all the way through. I can say it one time and hope that you wrote it down, so we don't have to keep repeating it again and again so we can carry on.
So how old is Poganda again?
Who can tell me how old Poganda is? I described the other day, from 6 to 10 years old is Poganda. And prior to that, like between the ages of 5 to 6 is the cusp of Balya or Kumara. Kumara means very young. So this is baby Krishna. And so many specialities about baby Krishna. And then so many specialities about Poganda Krishna. Poganda Krishna is 6 years old. But as we were saying the other day, the ages in Vedic time are different to the ages now. We can't compare Krishna's 6-year-old to a 6-year-old today, because Krishna was dancing with the gopis when he was 7 or 8 years old. So we can't compare the ages as we do materially today. That we have to appreciate as a Chintya Shakti and try and understand that or accommodate that. Now at this point, you might have sometimes been in circumstances in India still today. I can remember when we'd go to print the books in Delhi, and sometimes we'd have to sit in the communal place where they took their tiffins. And even today, they are all helping themselves to each other's tiffin. They are offering, oh, I got this today. And I can remember when my son first went to school in Vrindavan, he opened his tiffin and all the other boys looked in it and started taking everything out of it. He immediately pulled it, but what are you doing? And then he noticed that everyone else was doing the same thing. They were all helping each other to their other tiffins. And this is a very beautiful thing because it shows detachment from what's mine. Oh, this is mine. You know, it's a very open, because when we come to eat, that's when our senses are most excited. And we want to make sure that what's on my plate is mine. You know, we don't want someone else picking at it. But in this real transcendental world, there's such pleasure in giving Krishna, particularly, these special tastes from their mother. And the Devas are watching this. And Krishna is described as Yajna Bhak. He only accepts the food from the Yajna. And here he is, taking anything from all his suckers. And they're completely bewildered and astonished by this. We're making very splendid, wonderful offerings, you know, just all soaked in mantras, etc. And then perhaps Krishna will take by his mercy. But here these young boys, they're just taking something themselves even, and then putting it in Krishna's mouth. Seeing if it tastes sweet, and then giving it to Krishna. And Krishna's happily accepted this. This is astonishing for the Devas. So this situation is happening, and they're all very happily taking their picnic. And at this time it's described that they're joking with the monkeys and so on also at that time. At this time, Krishna had a wish, his Satya Sankalpa Shakti and his Leela Shakti are going to fulfill his wish. He wanted some obstacle for amusement. This is how Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti describes the next unfolding pastime, which is an enormous pastime actually. Very beautiful pastime. So then at this point, when he wanted some further amusement, the cowherd boys noticed, and Krishna noticed, that the calves had wandered away. This is another point, just to regress for 1 second, the difference in ages. Krishna is still tending the calves. So he's still mathematically considered in Komara Lila or Balya Lila. Even though he's on the cusp of Poganda Lila, he takes the cows out when he's in Poganda Lila. And there's a big meeting. This is actually Gopastami that we celebrate in the month of Kartik. This is when he's 6 years old and he has the official stamp, etc. And now he can take out the calves. Now he's actually considered a much older type of person. Baby calves was remarkable. They had these split places between, like the seasons also. It's like on Vasant Panchami, the first day of spring. It's always a springful day. Even if the seasons get a little bit mixed, it's always a very special occasion. And the distinction between the seasons, what to speak of the ages themselves, are absolutely distinct to the day, to the very minute that Krishna moves into his other ages. So now they've noticed that the calves have strayed. And then Krishna, he reassures all the cowherd boys, don't worry, because they all immediately become concerned. They are very dutiful. They have their duty to perform, to take care of the calves. And there are demons around, as they noticed, and they have to be very cautious about protecting the calves. So all of a sudden, the calves have wandered away from their tethering. So Krishna says, you all please stay here. You stay here and enjoy your picnic. I will be back in a moment. And actually he is back in a moment. I hear later. But he goes away searching for the calves. And it's described by Shukadeva Goswami. He's searching extensively. He's going in the caves, in the mountains, in the valleys, in the pasturing grounds. He's going everywhere looking for the calves. He's really searching for them. Even though somehow he understands what's happening, but he's not sharing that cognition with everyone. He's making himself look like a very bewildered young cowherd boy. And then he can't find them. So then he comes back to the cowherd boys. And then to his astonishment, he sees they've all gone too. And then it's described in one verse by Shukadeva Goswami that he becomes quite bewildered. For a moment, he enacts some display of bewilderment. And then he immediately understands, oh, this is the work of Lord Brahma. But as Gurudev explained many times, how could Lord Brahma, who is born from a lotus flower, which means he has a material body, understand the transcendence or the transcendental nature of these spiritual suckers, these spiritual cowherd boys? He can't understand that. It's not in his facility, capacity to understand. So it's described that actually Maya Devi created other cowherd boys and calves identical to allow Lord Brahma the illusion of stealing those calves and cowherd boys. But actually, in reality, Yoga Maya herself had put all those suckers and calves into a state of yoga nidra, like a timeless sleeping, resting place. That's actually what Yoga Maya had arranged. Yes, another prakosh, which means like another chamber. These are Krishna's eternal suckers, his eternal friends. He wouldn't let any whisper of harm come to them. He loves them, they're dearer to him than his very life. So then it's described how Lord Brahma was thinking that Krishna would probably understand that it was Lord Brahma who had stolen the calves. And this is somewhat of a part of his offense, that he was thinking that Krishna would probably come to him to beg him to return the calves and cowherd boys. So Lord Brahma was actually thinking like this. And this is the Vimohan. Mohan means illusion. He was illusioned like this. So Krishna understood all immediately, in fact. And now, just for the pleasure of the elder gopis, the mothers of Vrindavan, and the pleasure of the cows, this is why this whole pastime was arranged. Because the mothers were all seeing the greatest fortune of Yashodama, that she had Krishna on her lap. She was feeding Krishna, dressing Krishna, massaging Krishna, talking with Krishna, playing with Krishna, and yet they could also do a lot of those things, but it wasn't like full motherhood. They would also feed baby Krishna, but not in the same dependent way that Krishna would depend on Mother Yashoda. So they had this definite desire in their hearts to become like a true mother of Krishna. They wanted that. So Krishna wanted to fulfill all the desires of the Brijvasis. And the cows also, they also had a desire to have Krishna as their calf. So when Krishna recognized that all the that wasn't the same. So they wanted to marry just Krishna.
And they married in this year.
They married in this, I'm going to describe. But it's not the same type of desire as it was with the gopis. The gopis directly wanted Krishna to marry. The young gopis wanted Krishna as their husbands, but they just wanted Brajendrananda and Krishna as their husbands. It was a different consideration. It's described by Krishna. I'll come to it. Don't forget to remind me of that, because that's Vishwanath Thakur doesn't actually mention this point.
This is the most important.
Yes. This we will come to this. Yes, definitely. So there's a build-up. So Krishna manifests instantly all those cowherd boys and all those calves. And they are all directly Vishnu Tattva. They are all directly manifested from him. And it's described extensively how they take on exactly the same characteristics, the same dress, the same clothes, etc. They are all 100% identical. So now Krishna, with these Vishnu transformations of himself as the cowherd boys, then he returns to Braj. Now this is amazing. On this day, as I said yesterday, Lord Balaram wasn't present by Yogamaya's arrangement. So he didn't become stolen or transformed. So, but Baladev also, he is illusioned into thinking that all these cowherd suckers are in their own identity still. He's not thinking for a single second that these are Vishnu manifestations. So then when they return to Braj, a phenomena takes place, because normally, every time they return to Braj, when the Brijvasis, they hear the flutes and they see the clouds of dust being raised, and they understand Krishna's returning with the calves, they leave all their duties and they run to the royal road to welcome Krishna back. And all of them, previously to this day, have all ran to Krishna first, just to touch him, and just to get his closeness, proximity with him, and to feel that sweetness from Krishna. But on this day, they don't. They all run to their own sons completely, and they shower all of their affection on their own sons. And then it's described how they take their sons home very jubilantly, and they begin to wash them and massage them, and then start to feed them beautiful food stuff, and they become completely in ecstasy. And then they start to breastfeed them. So this indicates they're still in this Kumara age, because in the Poganda age, that breastfeeding doesn't take place. Even though, remarkably enough, even when Krishna goes to Kurukshetra, and Krishna is about 70 or 80 years old, he sits on the lap of Mother Yashoda, and immediately she's filled with milk. And Krishna is described, takes that milk at that age, sitting on the lap of Mother Yashoda. So this Leela is eternal. This mother is Vatsalya Bhav. It supersedes anything else.
Mother always sees son.
Yes, or even today, we see in our own lives, however old you are, your mother will always consider you her baby. So never try and tell your mother what to do, because you can't, because she's, your mother. She wouldn't listen anyway.
Like Rajanath just said, that when Mother Yashoda sees Krishna in any of his ages,
Yes.
she always actually sees the vision, and Krishna manifests the vision to her
Yes.
of his baby form.
Yes.
So, although
By the influence of that Madhurya,
Vatsalya.
that Vatsalya, in that mood, Krishna appears to her always like that.
right, and it's not that she's experiencing that he, as the full-grown adult and king Dwarka, is sitting on his lap. She actually experiences
Oh, yes.
that he's a baby.
I didn't make that clear.
Yeah.
You understand what Padmanabha said? She's not thinking, oh, he's grey hair, or he doesn't have any grey hair. But she's not thinking for 1 second. It's just like when he appears to Devaki after he's killed Kamsa. For a moment, he wants to melt their Aishwarya mood towards him. And he appears as a little boy that he wants Devaki to actually put him on her lap and breastfeed him, which is her secret. But she doesn't. It's described that Devaki never gives milk to Krishna. So how special are all these? Yes, it's described. Twice it's described by Vishnu.
What?
She doesn't. The Devaki doesn't actually give milk to Krishna because it's described in the Putana pastime how special it is that Putana even gave her milk to Krishna. But Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur comments at that time that not even Devaki had that privilege of giving milk to Krishna.
When he appeared, when he did
He doesn't say any more than that.
Just left.
Yeah, when he appeared, he just manifested as a
But when he came back to Mathura, that time he
No.
There's
No,
one.
they only regarded him. All understand this point very clearly. Understand all the Mathura-vasis and the Dwarka-vasis always saw Krishna as God. They saw themselves as very much connected to God. They saw themselves as very powerful. Many of them were demigods and devas, etc. So they were also like God themselves, but they were respecting Krishna as the supreme Paramatma, the supreme soul of all. They had witnessed all his miracles and they understood he could do anything. So they were always, this is their Sai Bhav. So for Devaki and Vasudeva to break that or purify it, Krishna tries, it's described, after the killing of Kamsa, it's described that he actually tries, he wants to create that, but it doesn't happen.
There's
This
one
is what I
time.
understood.
I thought differently. Maybe Jiva Goswami explained.
Yes, please.
And then,
I'm sure there are many
There's one time.
various, just a second, there are many various commentaries, I was talking about them yesterday, and perspectives on because most of these commentaries are written in their Samadhi Bhasya. They're written in their deep meditation. So that meditation of Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur has a very special uniqueness that is not the same as Srila Jiva Goswami's meditation on these paths. And another point is that all these pastimes are so variable anyway, they can actually ultimately accommodate all different perspectives simultaneously. It's not like Sanatana Goswami describes that the Keshi demon or the Kaliya demon is actually used like a chariot for Krishna to go to Mathura at the end, but this is in another day of Lord Brahma. So there are many, this is the beauty of discussing Krishna's life. Not just for this life, we have enough homework, 10 more lives, to actually go over all this variety of considerations. Maharaj, you had something.
also these commentaries are translated by those who do not have to read.
There's this whole consideration very much so also. I don't want to say
What did he say?
it reduce people's faith.
What's his comment?
I don't want to say because it reduces.
Gurudev said, we may read so many books, but if they have been translated by someone who is not Siddha, who is not perfect realized, then we maybe get 20% of the actual content.
It's like with Bhaktivedanta Swami's books. There's a special sweetness in all his commentaries because they were translated directly under his guidance by his shishyas. But many of the other books, they're not of that caliber. So there is room for error.
It's lock and key.
Nevertheless, we can take, it's all we've got, it's like a blind item. We take the
That's
best.
why
we
I'm
can.
telling. I watched something that they got it. I will check it.
But yeah, okay. Mara.
Gurudev told the story that at the same time that Krishna gave Devaki the benediction and returned her 6 sons that had been killed by Kamsa,
Yes.
that he also gave her the benediction of taking her breast milk that one time.
Okay, thank you.
Can you repeat
So there is a time when the Sadgarbhas, her 6 sons, were returned by Krishna. Bhakti Maharaj is sharing that actually, at that time Krishna gave her the benediction that she could give her breast milk to Krishna at that time. But as a general rule, it's not really there, because the nature of that Madhurya is actually, it's described in this pastime, that all the milk that Krishna was drinking from the mothers was their liquid prem. This was the specific, that's how can that liquid prem exist in a Dwarkavasi or a Mathuravasi to anything like the same degree. There might have been some moments, but the real essence of that milk is liquid prem. And another consideration here is it's this prem that controls the supreme controller. It's like we were told in the first, I think Maharaj mentioned, how Gurudev had come to tell us that your Prabhupada has said that Krishna is the supreme controller, and I've come to tell you actually he's not. So who is the supreme controller? In these leelas, it is Prem herself that is controlling the all-independent Lord. Krishna becomes totally dependent on the Brijvasis' love for him, because there's another pastime later on that used to always do a drama in Nanda Bhavan, in Nandagam, when all the Brijvasis saying, we think that your son is God. And then Nanda Baba would start to laugh and laugh. How could this be? You haven't even developed your milk teeth. You're 80 years old, but even you've still got your baby teeth. You're really foolish. You can't understand that he's not possibly God. So, what was I going to say? That. What was I saying in connection with that?
Krishna's control.
Oh yes. So Krishna. Nanda Baba is saying that he cries when he's hungry. You know, he becomes unhappy when he needs to rest or whatever. There's always this mood of dependence on the gopas and the gopis. Completely. And certainly, when we come to the more Rasik descriptions, he's utterly dependent on the love of Sri Radha. In Rasa Vichar, he's completely dependent on Radha. But in Tattva Vichar, he's totally independent. So only devotees, by chanting Hare Krishna and empowered by the personality of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, can appreciate and understand these topics. These topics were never ever opened up prior to 500 years ago. It wasn't 5,000 years ago that people understood these topics. It was under lock and key until Chaitanya Mahaprabhu burst that dam of prem to benedict these fallen people in Kali Yuga, and blessed we are. And take these blessings to understand what is this ashraya, as I've just described, and what is the meaning of this ashrita, these other creditors giving us this. So take it, drink it. It's our property, because we have the stamp of Mahaprabhu and the Rasik Vaishnavas in particular. Without that, we wouldn't understand anything. So, when he arrives back, as I described, all the mothers take such remarkable care and joy in their sons. They don't quite know why, consciously, that they have so much attraction to their sons. They're not thinking, oh, this is Krishna, but they have that exact same mood that Mother Yashoda has for Krishna. And the cows also. When the calves come into the pens in the evening time, the mothers begin mooing and mooing and mooing, and when they see their calves, they almost break free from the boundaries of the gopas in anxiety to reach their calves and nourish them. And it's described they're licking their calves like they want to swallow them. They're just licking and licking and licking their calves. And this is the nature that the mothers are just totally satisfied. The mother cows. What to speak of the mother gopis? Gopis. So everyone is submerged in an ocean of prem for these 12 months. And then it's described that during this time, Gargaracharya, he comes into the village, and then he says, actually the constellations all say this is the best age, best time for making betrothals. So as Brajanath Prabhu was saying, all of the almost 6-year-old gopas are betrothed to all the gopis, whose further desire is to have Krishna as their husbands. So they all actually become married, because betrothal in Vedic culture is not different to marriage. It means for life you will be with this particular personality. So then they are betrothed, or many festivals taking place, just like when we go and Braj. Every night they crank up the wedding music and so on. Braj, they like it. This is the life of Braj. Now they sort of replaced it with electronic music, but previously, but that joyous mood, that free festivity is still present in Braj today. There's still a flavor. How can it not be? The very atmosphere of Braj is contained in the dust of Vrindavan. The dust of Vrindavan is the same dust as was there 5,000 years ago. So when we go to Vrindavan, it's the dust that holds the jewels, in fact. And how do you access that? By putting your head to that constantly, or rolling in that, or being close to that, and in mood being close to that. And you see the Vrindavansis are still, many, very much carrying these moods. So now, 5 or 6 days before the... Okay, I'm not going to go into that this point. To be the husband. Okay, I'll talk to you about this. He's talking about Katyayani Vrat, but that's a different. Let me finish this pastime. There are so many aspects to this. The Katyayani Vrat is a different flavor. But here, this is about Lord Brahma and the Brijvasis. So now, 5 or 6 days later, the Gopas are with the cows on the top of Govardhan Hill. Not on the top. Govardhan Hill was around about 2 miles high. So they're in the higher pasturing grounds. And they suddenly see down in the valley, they see with the cowherd boys are the younger calves. These calves are 1 year old practically by this time. These mother cows have already had new calves. They've had younger calves. But when these mothers see their older calves, these 1 year old calves who are expansions of Krishna, down in the valley below, it's described that they break free from the boundaries of the Gopas and they run down this very difficult path of Govardhan Hill with pebbles and stones and bushes. It's not a place where a cow would normally run down. They not only run, but they run very fast, as described, with their necks stretched out and their tails up high. Have you seen a cow running when it's got its tail up straight? It's really going somewhere, you know, it's got an intention. So it's running fast down this hill, almost to a degree where they could break their legs. And the Gopas are really angry and disturbed that why have they endangered themselves in such a foolish way, running down the hill like this. And they're running, trying to stop them, trying to fend them off from actually hurting themselves. And they arrive in the valley at the bottom. And the mothers, of course, immediately go to their calves, these 1 year old calves. But the cowherd men, who are so angry and irritated and disturbed by the cows, immediately melt on seeing their darling sons. When they see their sons in front of them, then they immediately melt, just as the cows melted, and they grab their son and they embrace their sons. And they smell their heads and they soak their sons in their tears of affection. So Balaram, he's watching this phenomenal scene. Somehow Yogamaya has begun to lift the veil. Because Balaram, as we said at the beginning, wasn't included in this pastime from the very beginning. He's still Baladev in his full identity. So he saw the cows come down, he saw them go to the calves, and he saw the remarkable nature of these angry Gopas suddenly melted when they saw their sons, when they became completely affectionate. And he's wondering, what's going on here? What phenomena is this? And then he looks closer and closer. And then gradually it's described like in 2 or 3 stages that Yogamaya lifts the curtain. Because it's a heavy thing. It's a big emotional impact, as I'm going to describe for Baladev. That actually these cowherd boys are not who he thought they were. Baladev is omniscient. Baladev holds all the universes on his head. How can Baladev not know what's happening? But at this time, Krishna's covered even Baladev with his Yogamaya. So Baladev is really described as quite bewildered by this. And he thinks at one point, he starts to see this other energy is prevalent. And he started to think, is this some demon energy that has actually come into play? Or is it by the sages or the demigods? Who's actually doing all this? And then he looks a bit closer, listen, and then Krishna, or Yogamaya rather, lifts a little bit more of it, and eventually, to his utter astonishment, he sees that all these cowherd boys, these suckers, are actually Vishnu Tattva. They're all Vishnu forms. They're all coming from Krishna. Baladeva is astonished when he sees like this. And then at this point, he looks to Krishna, and just in a glance and a few facial expressions, Krishna describes to him what happened. Because two supremely high personalities, they don't have to have a lot of words, they can just in codes explain, actually this is Lord Brahma illusioning himself by thinking he can test my mystic potency. And Balaram, he realizes this, and he's quite stunned. He's actually utterly astonished. And he turns to Krishna and said, well, why didn't you tell me about this? And Krishna says, because I knew you would miss Sridham too much. If I had told you Sridham was going to become under the influence of Yogamaya for a whole year, you would not have survived. Your love for Sridham is too thick. It's too deep. So I couldn't tell you that. So I had to maintain this covering on your consciousness. And Baladev Prabhu, actually, Jiva Goswami describes, is not at all happy with this. He doesn't come out cow-grazing with Krishna for the next 5 days after this fast. He just stays at home with Mother. He won't come out with Krishna. He's actually unhappy that his dear, most confidential friend didn't reveal to him this confidential pastime. He's quite unhappy about it. So he stays home.
Well, then how come Krishna didn't feel separation from Sridham and all the cowherd boys?
I don't have an off-pattern.
I have it right here in front of me. I thought you had the note, so I was just giving it to him. It says, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur.
You're cheating. You got the book.
No, I'm assisting.
Tell us.
You told me to do this.
Yes.
Because Krishna in an expanded form was still with them. And Baladev didn't go out that day, so he wasn't.
Yes. So Krishna was in that Yoga Nidra space with those suckers. He was never actually separated from them.
Rajanath mentioned this before about how Gurudev explained this.
Yes.
And actually the way that it was, Gurudev was testing us to see if we understood was it when Gurudev was in Miami. And I think he was working on that when he was 10th cancer.
I think I remember this also.
Yeah. And Srila Gurudev then said, how many groups of cowherd boys were there? So then Gurudev revealed to us that there was a third group. Okay? There was the first group, which is the actual cowherd boys.
That's taken by Yogamaya.
There's the Maya cowherd boys.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And then there's what is created by Yogamaya, Krishna in another prakosh, not Yoga Nidra.
Right.
Not that they're sleeping in that prakosh, but actually the exact pastime is still going on.
They were taking a picnic for 1 year.
Right.
But in this, Shukadeva Goswami, specifically, because at the end of this pastime, when Krishna finally returns, they say, oh, you were only away for a second. That's how they comment. So this is the understanding is in time and space to appreciate this fully. So Maharaj is sharing that there's actually 3 groups of, there's the Mayic ones, the Yogamaya ones, and the original ones, we can say, who are still in another prakosh, means chamber, another prakosh performing these pastimes. So actually, in answer to Vaikanis Maharaj's question, which he's already answered, is that they were never separated from Krishna, in fact. But Baladev was, and Baladev was supported and nourished by the Vishnu Murti, or the Vishnu expansion of Krishna. That was sufficient. The pastimes themselves were sufficient. That's my understanding.
What did Vishwanath Chakravarti says, Krishna did not suffer from any separation because he was close to them in an expanded form, that church for their calves. So the pastime for them, as Gurudev said, is still going on, but it's in a different coach. Just like when Uddhava came to Vrindavan, first he saw Vrindavan without separation, and then he saw Vrindavan with separation. All are going on simultaneously. But Krishna can also mess with time, so even though they were enjoying that picnic for a year, at the end of it, it may seem like a moment. Just like Rasa Leela. And even though it's the night of Brahma.
I was thinking about today when Uddhava went to deliver the message to the gopis and that Uddhava Keri pastime, and he told them to close their eyes and to just remember Krishna, and during that closing of the eyes, which was like a second, time was compressed, and the entire Rasa Leela of 4,320,000,000 years took place in that moment for the gopis. And then they opened their eyes after a moment for Uddhava, and they were very satisfied. They were happy with Uddhava. He delivered the message. So it's right, that compression of time. So it's a dynamic of this nature, the reality that Gurudev has actually, revealed to us through this. So there's the pastime on one level, then there's the pastime on another level, and the pastime on another level, on infinite levels. We can churn these pastimes over till we leave on. This is why Parikshit, right at the very beginning, is saying these are like newer and newer and newer. He hasn't even heard them before. I can remember listening to Bhakti Surya Sridhar Maharaj talk about Damodar River one time in Sevakash. And we'd heard it so many times, but he was bringing in so many other aspects from the acharyas to embellish it. So it's like this. I gotta finish, I've got 10 minutes. Just one, I was gonna touch on the Nuka Sura also, but the Nuka can't even come into play today. Never mind.
All the colored boys, they got married.
Yes.
But why Krishna and Balaram did not get married?
What's the question?
He wants to know why Krishna and Balaram didn't get married amongst all the other marriages that took place at that time. So I throw that out to you. That's Maharaj. You know, Vrinda, what you said?
No.
Why did not Krishna and Balaram get married or engaged or betrothed at the same time as all the other cowherd boys got betrothed in that year when Krishna was expanding himself? Why did he not get... I mean, Yoga Maya didn't arrange for that. We know the story when actually always Kirtida and Mother Yashoda and Rishabhanu and Nanda want Radha and Krishna to be married. But there's the story of Yoga Maya arranging for them not to be married. There's a time when Radharani has that haldi, that turmeric paste put on her hands by Mother Yashoda in Nandagam where she's cooking. And then she washes it off in that pili puka. And then all the residents of Barshana think, oh, Radharani's had a proposal from Mother Yashoda. And then they start exchanging gifts. And then everyone becomes joyous because they're sure that this wedding is going to take place. But then Purnamasi comes in and is very happy to hear the news, but does an astrological chart, which is actually all the first 11 houses are totally compatible with these two getting married. But the final 12th house says that one of these two must die if they get married. So that's like the end. And then a few weeks later, Purnamasi declares, actually Radharani should marry Abhimanyu. Oh my God, this person, Jyotila and Kotila, the least liked practically in Braj, the most cantankerous family, always complaining, never had enough. And most beautiful Radharani had, but Purnamasi is the Mahant. Purnamasi is the mystic city. She's the personality who presides over Braj. Then they must follow her orders. So Radharani marries Abhimanyu. For Parakiya.
In this situation also, all the cowherd boys and all the gopis, they were getting married. So all became very happy.
Yes.
But then Purnamasi came and she told Maharaj and Yasodhana, these two boys, Baladev and Krishna, if they get married, big problem will come. They will create then the whole future will be unfortunate. So they should not get married.
So Rajanath is saying that Buddha has revealed, I think it's saying something also in Gopal Chandra, something little at the end, but that Purnamasi is telling that if Krishna and Balaram marry along with everybody else, there will be great misfortune for them and for the whole of Braj. So they should not marry at this time. So they don't get married. So he asked the question, but he already knew the answer. So I don't know the answer to some of the things. No. Listen. So then finally, Lord Brahma, he returns. Actually, it's described he just goes to Satyaloka and comes straight back because he's actually refused entrance because there's an impersonator who's sitting on his throne, and the gatekeepers have been told to send away another impersonator who comes pretending to be Lord Brahma. You understand? Krishna's gone ahead and is impersonating Lord Brahma on Lord Brahma's throne. So when the real Lord Brahma comes, Krishna has directed the gatekeepers, there's a false Brahma around, don't let him in, chase him away. So when Lord Brahma comes to his own gate, he's chased away by his own guards, and then he starts to think, what's happening here? Because Krishna wanted to hurry him back, make sure it was only 1 year, because in that time it was 1 year. So when Lord Brahma comes back, then he comes to give back the cowherd boys, but then he sees to his astonishment that all the calves and all the boys are still there exactly as he left them. So then he becomes really astonished, and he looks at 2 heads to his cave where he's hidden them, and looks to these new boys, these Vishnu Murtis, and he sees them both, and then he becomes more and more, then he uses all his mystic omniscience, which is not like Baladev, because as I said earlier, he's born from a lotus, he's material, Lord Brahma. So he only has the conditioned consciousness, ultimately. He can't understand, and becomes more and more bewildered. And then suddenly, Krishna reveals all these Vishnu Murti forms of himself that all become Lord Brahma's Ishtadev. They all become, actually his Ishtadev is Gauravadakshai Vishnu. He sees all them as they're in their Vishnu forms, and he's completely bewildered. And it's described that he was trying to exhibit his own power to cover something so much more powerful. It's not possible. It's like a glowworm in the day. It has no power. So when Lord Brahma looked at all the boys, they had a bluish color of rain clouds and silken garments. And also the calves had the same. And then it's described that he saw them all with 4 arms and beautiful complexions, garments, etc. And all the boys' chests were marked with the Srivatsa, that line of Lakshmi. And they had beautiful armlets, and Kastuma jewels were on their necks of all of them, and bracelets and ankle belts. They were all holding conch, mace, disc, and lotus. And helmets, earrings, garlands, sacred belts, all extremely beautiful. Every part of their body was beautifully decorated, and many devotees were worshipping them. This is what Lord Brahma saw. He just didn't see the splendor of Lord Vishnu. He saw millions of entities worshipping each particular Vishnu. This is why I wrote it down. I want to say this. How many were worshipping? It's described that Tulsi was chanting. And these forms, they all had pure smiles, like increasing the light of the moon. And then all creatures, from insects up to Lord Brahma, were worshipping these Vishnu Murtis. From the blade of grass, they were all worshipping these forms of Vishnu. And they were surrounded by opulences. And the Ananasiddha, the mystic potencies, and the 24 elements, and the Mahatattva, all personified, were worshipping these forms of Lord Vishnu. And then Lord Brahma, he saw time personified, worshipping Lord Vishnu. He saw Svabhav, one's own nature, personified, worshipping Vishnu. He saw the sun stars, the reformation, worshipping Vishnu. He saw calm, desire, worshipping Vishnu. He saw karma, fruitive activities. He saw the gunas. He saw all the demigods, all worshipping each particular hundreds of thousands of Vishnus. Imagine that. sight must have been so astonishing. And it's described at this point that Lord Brahma, seeing all this, his 11 senses were jolted by astonishment, and he was stunned by this transcendental exhibition and bliss, and became completely silent. He couldn't say a thing. He was totally overwhelmed. And it's described like a child plays with a clay doll in the presence of the deity. And then Krishna withdrew that vision to Lord Brahma, because Lord Brahma was not qualified to see anymore. And then he revealed himself just as a small cowherd boy. And then he starts very beautifully, Krishna, to reveal the beauty of Vrindavan to Lord Brahma. This is described by Shukadeva Goswami. But then he starts to reveal the sweetness of Vrindavan, the trees, etc., and the lakes, and the beauty of the birds and so on, and the atmosphere of Vrindavan. This is even more beautiful than this previous Aishwarya exhibition that he just demonstrated. He's trying, as any great personality, to always give the benefit, the good, even though Lord Brahma has committed some offense here. But still, Krishna is trying to benedict him and trying to elevate his consciousness to Madhurya by showing this. And then it's described how Lord Brahma, he jumps down from his swan carrier, and of course the demigods, they never touch this earth. But at this time, the king, the height, the creator of the demigods, he gets down and touches the earth out of humility. And he bows his head down with his crowns, and he's weeping and weeping and weeping, offering prayers to Krishna. Actually, he can't speak for a long time. He's soaking the earth with his tears of astonishment. He's just been through the most profound. Lord Brahma is an amazing personality, filled with emotions and so on. And this staggering situation has just taken place in his heart. He's seen the opulence of Krishna more than he could have even begun to consider previously. And he's also seen the absolute sweetness of Krishna. And then he begins to offer beautiful prayers, and he's given up his prestige of being a great demigod. And it's described here by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur that Shukadeva Goswami is describing this pastime in the present. He's not describing it as something that happened before, because Shukadeva Goswami is witnessing this pastime directly in his samadhi bhasya, in his meditation. He's seeing it. This is another dynamic of the pastime that is happening right now. And Shukadeva is giving this impression to Parikshit Maharaj. And then it's described that Krishna apparently returns to the original cowherd voice. Lord Brahma, after his prayers, actually in the next chapter, there's a specific chapter, chapter 14, which is just Lord Brahma's prayers. But prior to that, the end of the pastime is described, where Krishna goes back to join the original cowherd voice, and they just say, oh, you were just away for a moment. And this is what it seems like. And then they continue their picnic, and then they return to Braj as their own identities. Now this is another big transition. All of a sudden, Krishna is no longer all the cowherd boys and calves. So how does Krishna make that reconciliation? It's described that he inspires a great festival at this particular time when he returns. And Krishna is at the center of the festival, as always, because specifically Aghasura is going to be described now. Aghasura wasn't told to the Brajvasis before this day, because Aghasura happened a year ago, but that year has somehow or other been compressed and been obliterated from the Brajvasis. Do you understand the time situation? Do you understand?
Sakas were still in the forest. Who experienced it?
Huh?
Sakas were the whole year in the forest. Picnicking.
Yes, the Sakas haven't actually been home. So they are thinking, it's like if you go into a coma for a year and you come out of it, you don't know you've been in a coma. It was like that. They just came back to where they were previously. But how are the hearts of the mothers reconciled? And the hearts of the mother cows also reconciled. And Jiva Goswami specifically relates to this festival, this wonderful festival that took place when they returned. It's called Go-Juli. Go means the cow and Juli means dust. At the time when Krishna returned, there was this magnificent festival to celebrate the return of Krishna, which is a festival in itself, but also the killing of Aghasura demon, who was frightening all the demigods. So this created an opportunity for the most wonderful festival. And by the height and extraordinary nature of this festival, this transition took place between the gopis' hearts as being mother of Krishna directly and getting back to their normal boy. Because when Krishna returns now with the cowherd boy, they all run to Krishna. They no longer run to their own sons first. And the mother cows, they're only looking to Krishna. Their calves haven't become quite as attractive as they were previously. So there has to be some transition there. So Jiva Goswami is describing this pastime of this wonderful, wonderful, heart-melting festival which takes place there. So this is just one pastime that I've spoken for maybe just a bit more than an hour. So I just wanted to say here, I only have 2 more class slots here. So I'm obviously not going to finish all the demons. And I didn't really want to finish all the demons. We can go briefly through. But I want you to relish them yourselves and pick up this Bhagavatam itself. The purpose of these descriptions is to inspire you personally. This is only one day in a whole 12 months. But you should also be having this Bhagavatam daily. Be drinking this beverage. Be very familiar with the first 9 cantos and then know what is the nature and taste of this 10th canto. Because this is our prayojan. This is the ashraya. So we must appreciate it.
When the calves come back, wouldn't they look like 2 years old calves?
No, because time has been compressed. And there's, like the boys themselves don't grow during that time. It's not that they grow a year. Because actually, as I just said, it's like that year has been omitted from their very lives. But it doesn't even actually exist as far as a continuum of growth is concerned. It's not there. So the calves will stay.
Their mother who wasn't aware that there was.
Then they are their beautiful calves, still their beautiful, early calves. Even though there were other calves born in the interim during that year. If we can't understand it, that's good. It is achintya. You cannot, as we've described, all these billions of people who live in a little village of Braj, how is it possible to materially reconcile? But we should think about these things. And if we chant, remembering these things, Krishna will give us the reconciliation in the heart through Guru.
But what complicates that a little bit more, and inconceivability of expression of time and all of that,
Right.
is that one of the things that was a clue to validate that was what's going on here when he saw that there was so much affection.
Yes.
Because the fact is that the cows were coming down the Govardhan hill
Yes.
to see their calves,
Yes.
which were 1 year older.
Yes.
And they, in the meantime,
Yes.
they already had new calves.
Yes.
And that's the suspicious thing
No.
to validate. That
Yes.
how is it that they're showing more affection to their older calves, 1 year old calves, than they are to their new ones? This is very strange. And then he began to...
So it's a hiccup in the whole thing, having those new calves born. How could those new calves exist if that area wasn't really on the map, so to speak?
Right.
I don't know.
It's only not on the map for the cowherd boys. Everybody else, they just went along as normal.
Right.
It's only the cowherd boys who are in the other coast. And then it's described how Aghasura, they're playing on the bones of Aghasura. Why are they playing on the bones and desecrated body if it was a year? But somehow, for them, it was a year too.
And another thing is,
It's like Nityananda Prabhu. He would play all night with the boys, all day, all night. Nobody cared. And nobody kept track of time. So the cowherd boys were just out there for that whole time. They're also growing. Their calves are growing. So they come back into it. They weren't necessarily with going home every night, but that doesn't even occur to them
Even the
because,
scholars become bewildered.
yeah, because they were happy. They were with, I mean, if the gopis could,
Suddenly they're all betrothed. Yeah, they come back.
So it went on. So that year had a lot of substance because they were all betrothed. But did they?
Yogamaya fills in the gaps.
Yeah, okay, she has to fill in our gaps too.
Actually, it's described, Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur describes how she, in phases,
Yes.
reveals to Brahma
Balaram.
and to Balaram,
Yes.
first this, then
Yes,
this, then
yes,
this,
yes,
then
yes.
this.
So actually, we are in process of having the phases here.
Yeah.
So this is the first phase, maybe next year will be the second, and the third is second. How can we expect us to leap right ahead and understand all of these things immediately? So we've got these intellectual questions that we're analyzing it with materially, but actually there are answers to all these. And our Guru would probably say just chant Hare Krishna and worship your Guru.
Oh, you cannot
One
understand.
more question. Which demon did we discuss today?
We discussed the demon of illusion. This, let me, we're over time, but we'll just quickly go here, because we can't leave this part out. Let me see. Very simple. Free us from the cultivation of fruitive activities, karma, and speculation knowledge. By hearing about this pastime, we'll become freed from cultivating karma and jnana, trying to do something ourselves. And it's described, that's it. That's as much as Bhakti Thakur was given us. And I described the other day when we talked about Madhvacharya, Madhvacharya didn't include this chapter in his Bhagavatam commentary. He omitted it completely because he didn't want the Adi Guru of our Sampradaya to look like he was actually bewildered. He wouldn't even go there. So Bhakti Thakur also, he just says it's speculation and trying to develop your own mystic potency, etc.
He also warns in that commentary about being bewildered by the flowery words of the Vedas.
Right.
Because Brahma is the original source of all Vedic literature, is completely learned, but he got a little sidetracked with all of that, because the Vedas can be a little indirect as well.
You all heard this? Very important. That Lord Brahma has become bewildered by the flowery words of the Vedas to some degree. Because he also he has become bewildered by that, thinking that he can actually do something superior to that supreme Brahman. He can actually influence Krishna by his own mystic potency. So this is like the demoniac mentality, that we can be greater than Krishna. So through our jnana and activities and so on, this is purified by hearing it. This pastime, by the way, takes place in Vatsavan, which is close to Kamyavan, which is just around the corner from Nandaka.
This is very significant. Even Lord Brahma, time to time, because a few times he became bewildered.
Yeah.
If it happens to him, we are what to speak of tiny souls like us.
Krishna's greatness cannot be measured by the intellect. Even one of unsurpassed and topmost quality of intellect, intelligence, and learning in this world cannot touch an atom of Krishna's glory. Very
Shri
nice.
Brajendralanda Krishna ki jai, Bhagavad Mohan Leela ki jai, Shri Gurudev ki jai, Anantapura Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premnandi. This is exactly what these pastimes are supposed to inspire, as questions and answers.
Very nice.